I have full confidence, like I've told you, and like I've told you from the beginning, I have full confidence in our way of playing. Full confidence in myself as the play caller, in the way that we teach, and the way that we scheme. Full confidence in that. We got to bring this group together and do it consistently, okay? And that's where it's at. So you can stop asking that question, okay? I'm going to be calling the defenses, okay? So we're clear. So you don't have to ask that again.
Yeah, man. Okay, speaking of Eric Bieniemy, and folks, I'm not your enemy. I'm just a friend. I'm an ally. Okay, we're gonna break it down right now. The next topic that we have is dealing with coaching because a report came out by Jay Glazer that Frank Reich seat is the hottest seat in the NFL right now in regards to his job security. And the question that we have right now is, should his seat be the hottest seat? And the way how I want to start this off, and I want to begin here, right? Because I want to keep it close. There's a lot of guys that you can go here in this conversation. Obviously, Frank Wright being one of those. And I'm going to get to him later on, in my next lap or whatever. You got other guys around the league, Brandon Staley, Ron Rivera, Bill Belichick, right? Who would have thought? We are living in the end times, folks. Bill Belichick is on the hot seat, okay? This is where we are right now.
Eberflus is the other big one, I would say.
Eberflus, okay? I refuse to say Eberflus, okay? Him, yeah. But the guy I'm going to go with is Ron Rivera. His seat should be, burning hot, bro. Hell hot, okay? And the reason why I bring that up is because when you look at his tenure with the Washington Commanders, right? I mean, he's been there through the name changes, right? It was a Washington football team, Commanders. He saw it all, right? He only had one winning season, and they won 7 games that year. They got
a winning season, right? They just won the division.
It wasn't a winning season. It was a playoff visit. He made the playoff one time, and they won 7 games. It wasn't even a winning season. I'm glad that you corrected me there. And when you look at his record, 26-34-1 during his time with the Commanders. Listen, it's a black and white league. Okay, you are judged by your record. If you're winning, you get hired. If you're losing, you get fired. It's simple as that. Now, before I pass the rock, right? Because this guy was literally on my hottest seat from the offseason. Now, it's funny because back last year, I had, our Washington Commanders insider of the show, Lake Lewis Jr., come on. And I asked him this very question. I said that, will Ron Rivera lose his job? And he said something that I didn't understand until now. He said that, no, it's not going to happen because it's going to be a bad PR move. Now, what did he mean by that? Now it hit me. This was when Dan Snyder still owned the team. When you had all these allegations going on about the workplace and the toxic environment. And I understand now that what he meant by it would have been a bad PR move is that, okay, is Dan Snyder going to fire Ron Rivera when he is in the middle of losing that gig or him having to sell the team and all that? Like, no, it couldn't have happened. So basically, Ron Rivera was saved by everything that was going on with Dan Snyder. Now, clearly, there's a new owner in town, Josh Harris, who has owned the team. Now, if you ask me today, it will be the opposite. It will be a bad PR move to bring back a losing coach when you are in your first year of owning a team. So what I think is going to happen is that he may get fired before the season is over. I think he may be fired next week if they don't win. And they are going to probably elevate Eric Bieniemy going forward. Now, I understand there's a theory going on here. Zach brought it up on the show. And I want to shoot it down before he brings it up again. This Bill Belichick, coming over here. No, it shouldn't happen. Okay. Why would you trade a draft pick for a guy in Bill Belichick who has clearly lost touch with the outside world of today? Okay. Who we saw, his development with Mac Jones go to the wayside. Do you want that for a guy in Sam Howell? Like, Sam Howell is a good quarterback in the sense that he has talent. He has physical traits. He plays with a lot of grit, but he's still inconsistent. You don't want that guy and what he did with Mac Jones, okay? Understand what he did with Brady. That was freaking 20 years ago, bro. I understand that. This is a new era now. This is a new time. It's not 1999 anymore. What did he do with Mac Jones? Okay? You don't want that for Sam Howell. Okay? So, no. What they need to do is elevate Eric Bieniemy. You have him on your roster. Why let him walk when you can elevate him? I think that's what they're going to do. And I think Ron Rivera will not finish the season. I think his seat should be the hottest right now. It is the hottest right now.
Yeah, I thought you brought up some good points. There's no reason why he should have a job. I honestly thought you could have fired him. There were 2 separate times this season when Washington, they scored a late touchdown when they were down by 6, and they could have possibly went for 2 to win the game. You're talking about the game in Philly earlier in the season. You're talking about the game 2 weeks ago in Seattle when Sam Howell had a nice comeback drive. They lost. Seattle came right back on the field. They scored with about like 30 seconds left. So maybe it wouldn't have won them the game, but it would have given them the lead. But you have no excuse to give up all those points to Tommy DeVito and the Giants. I know that Brian Daboll, I still think he's a good coach. I know he's had an awful year, but that game just showed you that he is still clearly better than Ron Rivera. And when you look at this Washington team, I know they traded some guys at the deadline, right? Chase Young, Montez Sweat, but defense was supposed to be the calling card, right? Ron Rivera, he played for the 85 Bears, one of the best defenses ever. He has a guy that I thought at one point was a pretty good defensive coordinator in Jack Del Rio. But this defense, really since that 1 year in 2020 when they won the NFC East and got to the playoffs, I think it's been one of the more underachieving units in the league, and that falls squarely on Ron Rivera's shoulders. Now, in regards to their next coach and the Daniel Snyder stuff you brought up, which I agree, I do think that was a good point. I don't know. Yeah, you saw it because we were talking about it. Like after the game, there was no hot water in either team's locker room. Like, I just felt like that was a story that kind of just reminded me that this is still the Washington Commanders, and this franchise still has a long way to go to really get rid of all of the bad juju that Dan Snyder brought with him when he owned the team. And I think they're on the right track, right? Josh Harris, I think he's done a lot of good things since he bought the team, providing some good positive energy within the team. But Ron Rivera is going to get let go. And the Bieniemy stuff is interesting because I do think that you could make the case that they should just promote him, elevate him, no problem, and he should be the guy going forward. But I'm trying to put myself in Josh Harris's shoes. And just like the Broncos did when the Walmart family, they bought the team, you saw them like right away. They made a big splashy move. You saw it with Steve Ballmer in the NBA. He buys the team immediately. He trades for Kawhi Leonard. He trades for Paul George. We've just seen so many examples. Steve Cohen here with the Mets. He buys the team. They trade for Francisco Lindor a couple months later. Like, I've just seen it so many times with these new owners and these guys trying to make a splash and a big move right away. And I still think that's Bill Belichick. Like, I'm not saying it's the right or wrong move. I think you could make the point that they would be better with Bieniemy as the guy. But I think Josh Harris is going to do whatever he can to make that splashy move, and he still thinks Bill Belichick is Bill Belichick, and I still believe that when it's all said and done, he will be the coach next year.
That would be a mistake, and with all due respect to Belichick and his resume, I get it. He's the greatest coach of all time, but I mean, really, are you really going to trade? I understand where you're coming from. Like, I understand that you're talking about it from Josh Harris' shoes and him wanting to make that splash PR move. We talking about PR a lot. That's a PR move to get Bill Belichick. I get it. But are you really going to trade draft compensation for a guy who got fired? Like, I understand we talk about Sean Payton. Sean Payton didn't get fired. He retired. Okay? And that's what allowed him to be a hot commodity once he, took the year in the booth. This guy got fired or going to get fired. And obviously, if you trade for him, he probably got fired. Okay, and then he's going to want these other ulterior motives. Like, he has control of the team when you talk about the GM decisions. Okay, so you got to factor that in consideration. Do you want to give him those type of powers here? Is he going to ask for that? Like, I won't trade draft compensation for a guy who got fired, bro, unless McDaniel got fired today, not Bill Belichick, who clearly is 75, 100 years old right now. I just won't do that. But if they do that, so be it. It is what it is. Yeah, I want to touch on Frank Reich. Excuse me, I don't mean it like that. Things get misconstrued. We're living in a weird time. I want to talk about Frank Reich here. Okay, Lil don't go that route, so don't even go there. I want to talk about Frank Reich for a minute, and then I want to talk about Brandon Staley, who was a close runner-up for me. This was a 1A, 1B thing. Now, in regards to Frank Reich, right? I think when you talk about being one and done, like, should his seat be hot? Sure. Like, I think if you're talking about, the situation, and I understand you bring this up countless times about him wanting to draft CJ Stroud and the GM buzzing down saying, no, we're going to go Bryce Young.
It was the owner.
Yeah, the owner. The owner wanted to go Bryce Young. Now, I get that part of the equation and all that. But Bryce Young still was supposed to be a guy who came in this year ready to play. Clearly, he was named the starter, okay, before training camp, which I never really understood for the life of me. And I said that was wrong back then. So clearly, he got handed the job because clearly the Bryce Young I'm seeing right now, I don't know what the hell he showed y'all in the summertime for you to give him the job before training camp. So that was a failed mistake by Frank Reich in his behalf. He should be one and done to me, right? I'm not mad at that because when you talk about Trevor Lawrence in his first year, they got rid of Urban Meyer. Now, we do have to be fair here. And the reason why I'm not going with him, number one, is because Urban Meyer's firing was accelerated with all the theatrics regarding the, the situations outside of playing football. And, we don't have to deal with that with Frank Reich. But I just think that we are living in a different time. Once again, look at the name of the show. I don't know if he's in tune with the modern day game, So I do think if you want to save your quarterback, clearly he's lacking resources. He's lacking weapons. They don't have a bona fide number one. They need to patch that up. And if they want to move on from Frank Reich and get a new coach to bring new ideas and innovative ideas to help groom their quarterback, they should do it. And that's why I stand with Frank Reich. Now, I'm going to let you respond to that before I hit on any other coach.
Yeah, so I see what you're saying. My question, though, is do you think getting rid of Frank Reich, like no matter who they bring in, is that going to fix things? Because that's my concern, right? I think that passing, no matter who the coach is, passing on Bryce Young for CJ or passing on CJ Stroud for Bryce Young, I think that could go down as an all-time mistake. And keep in mind, this team doesn't have a first-round pick next year. Like the Bears own that. So if they finish with the worst record, Chicago's going to own the number one pick in the draft, not them. So I just think it's easy to blame Frank Reich, and I'm starting to see like he's probably not as good of a coach as I thought he was at one point in Indianapolis. When he got, what was it, like 20 touchdowns and 7 picks out of Carson Wentz only 2 years ago. That just seems like such a long time ago. But I just feel like this situation was just awful from the beginning. And them decided to draft Bryce Young when he wanted CJ Stroud is going to go down as an all-time mistake. And honestly, even if you bring in a guy that's a better coach than Frank Reich, I'm just not really sure how much it's going to fix things because the situation is not good right now. They don't have a first-round pick. I mean, they could sign T. Higgins. Like, that might help things a little bit, but is that all of a sudden going to make this team a contender? I'm not sure. I would say no. And I still think with Bryce Young, as much as I loved him in college, I liked the draft pick at the time, there are some concerns. The size is really appalling. You watch him on TV, he looks really small to me. I don't know how well he's going to be able to see the field. And I thought this offensive coaching staff was good. Like, not only with Frank Reich, but they have Josh McCown as their quarterback who got a head coaching interview. They have Thomas Brown, who Frank Reich gave play calling duties to for a few games. Like, he at one point was considered to be a possible head coaching candidate. They have Jim Caldwell on the staff. I didn't think this situation was as bad as it is for Bryce Young. And although you could critique Frank Reich, I don't think he's some great coach. And if you want to fire him, fine. I don't think it's the craziest thing in the world, but I just don't know if you're hiring someone better, if that's really going to fix anything.
Yeah, I think when you get into a position of talking about the owner is not going to take ownership, no pun intended. He's not going to take ownership and say, well, I told you to draft this guy, like it's my fault, my bad. No, the owners don't be held accountable. They're in positions where they do what they want and they react to what they do, how they react to what they do. And that's what's going to happen here. Me, if you ask me today what I would do as an owner, I don't think I will fire him, this year. I think I will prioritize the other things in regards to building this roster and roster construction. But if they want to deal with the headaches of juggling multiple things, then that's what they're going to do. And I want to talk about Brandon Staley before we move on here, because that was a close, guy I actually thought about. I thought I was going to go with him, but I tried not to get caught up with all the theatrics after the game and the comments and the snapping on reporters and all that. Look, the reality is, as I said before, it's a black and white league. He's not winning games right now. He's supposed to oversee the defense, and the defense is straight garbage. They gave up 41 points to the Lions, a couple weeks ago. They made Jordan Love look like Patrick Mahomes out there. And then we're going to come back on these shows and talk about Quentin Johnson and he's a bust and all that and scapegoat him. When you look at the defense, they're not doing their job. And Brandon Staley, you got to oversee that. That's your unit. So for him not to, even think about stepping down, it goes back to the lack of accountability on his behalf and why he can never be a coach of my team, because he's not a leader. When you talk about that game last year that they blew in the playoffs where they had a 21-0 lead and they lost that game, he didn't take accountability for that game. He pointed fingers at the locker room. Okay, that's not a winning coach. That's not a leader of men. And then once again, by him snapping on reporters, saying that I'm not going to step down from calling plays, not even think about it, that's an issue for me. Because at least with Nick Sirianni, okay, who was calling plays for the Eagles before, he stepped down, realized it wasn't it. He gave those duties up, and the Eagles haven't looked back since. You have to do what you got to do in the betterment of the team. And at least, if your seat is hot, at least make ownership believe that you're making a move by stepping down. Like, show him something like, all right, you may fire me, but I'm making a move. That's what McDermott did when he fired Ken Dorsey. Okay, things are getting hot now. I'm starting to feel the rumors here. Let me fire Ken Dorsey to make it look like I'm doing something so I can buy me some more time. He should have done that. But guess what? The Chargers are going to go down. He's going to go down with his ego, and he's going to be without a job. And it's going to be nobody to blame but him. He can't blame Justin Herbert. He's doing his thing. He's been playing, like a good quarterback, this year. With all the ups and downs, he's still been playing and having moments of being an elite quarterback. It's not him. It's not Quentin Johnson, okay? Understand, he catches the ball. We having a different conversation, but it doesn't erase the fact that you made Jordan Love look like an all-pro player. So, no, he should be on the hot seat, and I think he's right up there with Ron Rivera, in my honest opinion.
Yeah, it was Jordan Love's best game of the season by far, and that was right after the Lions offense just torched them the week before in Los Angeles. You know where I stand on this. Anyone who's listened to the show long enough has known where I've standed on this. Like, I think you would have had a reasonable case to fire him after his first year, and things have gotten worse, and things have gotten worse since. I think, we mentioned earlier in the show, like, where did it go really wrong for Zach Wilson and the Jets? I think in this case, Staley, there were times a little bit towards the back end of last year where the Chargers defense was playing a little bit better. But, man, when he played Mike Williams, a player that has been known to be injury prone throughout his career, when he played him in that meaningless Week 18 Bronco game right before the playoffs last year and they lost him for the Jaguars game, that's when I really knew, like, okay, enough is enough. And you should have fired him after the Jaguar game. But this is the Chargers we're talking about. Like, this is not a serious franchise. Like, well, I got to be honest with you. He should be fired now. He should be fired by the end of the season. But, like, am I confident the Chargers are going to do that? No, because this is not a serious franchise. Like, this is not a franchise that takes winning seriously. The only thing Dean Spanos takes seriously is his bank account. And the only thing I'm seeing all across, NFL Network and ESPN are these guys trying to defend Brandon Staley for some reason. Like, he has an elite PR campaign, but his coaching results just don't back it up. And it's frustrating. And one last point I'll make on the Chargers, Lil, that I'm curious for your thoughts. I feel like I've just gotten so numb to the point over the course of the last few years that when we're talking about the Chargers, the conversation is always like, oh, this roster is super talented and there's no excuse for any coach not to be making the playoffs with this team year in and year out. And I was just thinking about it, and we should have saw this coming a little bit considering Herbert, he got paid this offseason, and that's really like a big turning point when excuse me, when you don't have to pay your quarterback on a rookie deal. But I look at the future of this team around Herbert, no matter who's coaching the team, right? Like Austin Eckler, he's probably not going to be back next year. Neither is Mike Williams. Joey Bosa got put on IR. He's getting older. Khalil Mack is old. I like Keenan Allen. He's a really good player that's had a phenomenal career, but he's getting older. He's going to be one of the older wide receivers in the league next year. I just look at the situation around Justin Herbert, even if they do change coaches, and I'm honestly not very inspired. And I don't think Dean Spanos, even if he does get rid of Staley, is going to be willing to pay enough for a guy that's really going to make a difference. So I look at the situation around Justin Herbert right now, and I don't think it's really as good as everyone makes it out to be. I know we've gotten so used to the fact that, oh, it's the Chargers. This is a team with plenty of talent that any coach should be able to easily win 10 or 11 games with. I don't necessarily see that. And even if they do move on from Staley, I'm not confident that this situation is good enough to get the results a lot of people are expecting.
I mean, look, I think for any coach, and I'm just simulating that Staley is going to be fired eventually. Like, I don't want to come back to this conversation a year from now and talk about the same garbage again. Like, I would really be tight. Like, I would literally just forget about the Chargers. Like, I don't want to come back here next year around this time talking about Brandon Staley's job. He needs to go. But I think if, assuming that he's gone around this time and we talk about this offseason, that a coach is going to have to take everything in context. And, especially if you look at the Chargers job and you're talking about the attractiveness about it. When you talk about the roster and what you just brought up about these old guys, these old Uncle Jews, we have to keep it real here. Keenan Allen is old. And I understand he could have, outings where he plays like a top 10 receiver in the league. But my guy's old. Okay. He had a couple drops in the game. I don't know what happened, but he's old. And he's one hamstring away from being out for multiple weeks and being on IR. Right. Austin Eckler, he broke off and running this game against the Packers. Right. Because it was blocked.
He's going to be back. Okay. He's gone.
Listen. The Red Sea was parted by the blocking. Okay. And that was the slowest run I ever saw in my life. My guy's done. Okay. He has no juice left. He talking about how you want to get paid. He's finito. He's done. Okay. The only thing he could give you is work, outside of the backfield with catching the ball and being shifty a little bit and helping you in the red zone with that. He's done. Okay. He's not a third down, every down back. He's done. He's washed. Okay. Quentin Johnson is a bust. We do have to take that in consideration when you talk about the attractiveness of the job should Brandon Staley lose the job. But there's one guy there that is obviously going to bring, any coach, and that's Justin Herbert. And he is a savior for the franchise. And that's why I'm on social media. And that's why I'm on the chat, campaigning for Justin Herbert to get up out of there because they are going to ruin his career. And then we're going to have people that don't watch the game of football calling him a bust because they see wins and losses and records and this and that and playoffs and lack thereof.
And I don't think you're wrong, but the problem is, bro, he just signed like a 6-year contract to stay there for like going forward. Like they're not going to trade him. Like he doesn't have a way out. Like, that's the issue. And I feel like this regime, they spent a lot of money on the big names on defense, Khalil Mack, Joey Bosa, Derwin James. Like they have all these big names, but they're getting older. And I just think in a year or two, when we look at the situation around Justin Herbert, and I agree, like he's very far from the biggest problem on this team. But I don't really see it getting better for him going forward, no matter who they hire as the coach. And that's pretty nerve-wracking.
All I know is that there's a couple coaches that's going to hear this when the season is up.
Yeah!